Hello everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The road had been nothing more than a suggestion, two ruts carved into the earth, swallowed in places by moss and ferns. Thomas Everett kept telling himself he made the right decision to follow it, that even if it was forgotten by most, it must lead somewhere. Cars didn't break down for the fun of it, and phones didn't go dead at the same moment unless fate had a cruel hand. The woods pressed close around him, branches snagging his sleeves as though urging him to turn back. His flashlight guttered, a weak cone of light barely holding the dark at bay. With each step, his boots crunched, but the sound seemed oddly thin, like it was being devoured before it could echo. "Just keep walking," he muttered, voice low but sharp in the silence. "There has to be something out here." Hours seemed to melt. His legs ached, his throat burned, and still the path twisted ahead, a pale scar through the trees. Then, at last, the forest broke open. Hollow Lake lay before him, vast, black, perfectly still. The moon's reflection floated on its surface, but no ripple touched it. It was a mirror without a flaw. And there, at the water's edge, stood a house. Its roof slouched, its porch sagged, but yellow light spilled from its windows. A fire, Thomas thought. A fire meant people. Salvation. He hurried forward, his breath fogging the night. As he drew near, the front door groaned and drifted open, though no figure stood within. "Hello?" he called, pausing at the threshold. "Is someone home?" "My car." No reply. The fire inside glowed steady. A quilt lay folded neatly on the couch. A glass of water waited on the table, droplets sliding lazily down its side. Thomas's relief tangled with unease. Still, exhaustion won. He stepped inside. The warmth wrapped him instantly, thick and almost wet. The fire licked the logs but made no crackling sound, only silence. And then he froze. Upstairs, faint as breath, came the drag of something soft across the floor. Thomas stood in the doorway, his body tense, eyes fixed on the ceiling above. The sound hadn't been loud, just a faint scuff, as though bare feet or heavy fabric had dragged across the floorboards. It could have been the house settling, he told himself. Old houses made noise. But the silence that followed was worse. Too deep. Too watchful. "Hello?" he tried again, voice cracking. I don't mean to intrude. My car broke down, and I just need to use a phone. Or..." His words trailed off. The house offered no answer. Even the fire burned without sound, its flames shifting like a silent performance. He stepped further in. The door swung shut behind him with a muted click, though he hadn't touched it. His throat tightened. The downstairs looked lived in, though no one appeared. A lamp glowed warmly on a side table, its cord trailing into darkness. The couch sagged with recent use, cushions shaped as though someone had only just risen. The glass of water gleamed in the firelight, cold and inviting. Thomas hesitated, then picked it up. The rim was wet. Someone had drunk from it recently. His pulse quickened. "Maybe they're upstairs," he whispered, though saying it aloud did nothing to ease the dread. He climbed the staircase, each step sighing faintly under his weight. Halfway up, he paused, heart hammering. The air felt heavier here, charged, as though the house itself was holding its breath. At the top, a hallway stretched before him, lined with closed doors. A single door at the far end stood open, dim light spilling from within. "Hello?" he called again, voice shaking. I just need help. If anyone's there." The silence pressed down, thick as wool. Still, he forced himself toward the open room. Inside was a bedroom, simple, clean, too clean. A quilt lay stretched tight across the bed. A nightstand bore a small oil lamp, its flame motionless, unwavering. And on the pillow was an indentation, the shape of a head, as if someone had just been lying there. Thomas stepped back. "No," he breathed. Behind him, down the hall, a door creaked open. The creak echoed like a groan through the silent hall, the kind of sound that made Thomas's blood run colder than the night air outside. He spun, flashlight trembling in his grip, its weak beams slicing across the walls. One of the doors, 3 down on the left, now stood ajar. It hadn't been before. He was certain of it. His breathing grew shallow. He thought about leaving, about bolting down the stairs, back through the woods, even if it meant stumbling in the dark for miles. But his legs refused him. Fear had nailed him to the floor. A whisper seemed to drift from the open door. So faint, he couldn't be sure if it was real. "Thomas!" The sound of his own name sent a shiver like ice water through his chest. His throat locked. He hadn't told anyone his name. Not here. Not tonight. The flashlight flickered, sputtering like it would die any second. He cursed under his breath and forced his feet to move. Each step was agony, the air growing heavier with every inch he drew closer to the open door. "Who's there?" he demanded, trying for authority, but it came out hoarse, unsteady. The door swayed slightly, as if nudged by a hand unseen. He pushed it open the rest of the way. The room beyond was dark. His flashlight beam revealed walls lined with peeling wallpaper, a dresser scarred with age, and a mirror that leaned against the far corner. The glass was cloudy, warped, but it caught the flashlight's glow enough to show a shape. Thomas's heart stopped. In the reflection, there was a figure. A tall, thin shape, standing right behind him in the hall. He whipped around. Nothing. The hallway stretched empty, silent. When he turned back, the mirror showed only himself, pale and shaking. Thomas backed out quickly, slammed the door shut, and staggered down the hall toward the stairs. The fire still burned below, but now, faintly, it smelled wrong, sweet, metallic, like something cooking that shouldn't be. Thomas descended the stairs too quickly, his hand skimming the banister as if it were the only real thing holding him upright. The house seemed to lean around him, boards sighing faintly, though the air was still. The fire still blazed in the hearth, but the wrongness in its scent clung thickly now. Not with smoke. Not the earthy bite of ash. It was sweeter, heavier, almost coppery, like burnt sugar mingled with blood. He gagged and covered his nose. "What the hell is this place?" Crossing the room, he crouched by the hearth. The flames danced without sound, and when he reached toward the heat, his hand recoiled. There was none. The fire burned without warmth. His skin prickled, the hair on his arms rising. He stood quickly and turned toward the door. Enough. He didn't care if he had to walk until dawn. He couldn't stay here another second. But when he reached for the handle, it refused to turn. He rattled it harder, then shoved his shoulder against the door. The frame groaned but held. Locked from the outside. Panic surged through him. He spun, eyes darting from corner to corner. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied, full, as though every inch of shadow was watching him. The glass of water still sat on the table. Only now, when he looked at it, it wasn't clear. It was red. A slow bead slid down the side, thick as syrup. "No," Thomas whispered, stumbling back. Behind him, the stairs creaked. A deliberate step. He froze, listening, his breath shallow. Then another step, heavier this time. Someone, or something, was descending, one tread at a time. "Who's there?" His voice broke. The firelight flickered, casting shadows that stretched across the walls. And just before the figure reached the bottom step, the flames guttered low, plunging the room into near darkness. The stairwell yawned with shadows, each step swallowed by a gloom that flickered in rhythm with the fire. Thomas's chest tightened as the figure drew lower, one tread at a time, slow, deliberate. "Stay back," he warned, though his voice cracked, trembling with a fear he couldn't mask. He gripped his useless flashlight like a weapon, its dying beam sputtering across the walls. The steps stopped. The silence pressed in thicker than before, like the whole house was holding its breath again. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, faint, like the dry rasp of paper torn slowly, came a whisper. "You came back." Thomas's skin went cold. "No. I've never been here before." The voice didn't answer. Instead, something shifted in the dark, cloth brushing wood, the creak of weight moving again. He backed toward the fire, desperate for light, for anything that made sense. The flames sputtered once, twice, then surged, flaring bright enough to flood the room. He spun, expecting to see the figure exposed on the stairs. The staircase was empty. But on the bottom step, resting where no object had been before, lay a small item. A key. Thomas stared, chest heaving. He approached cautiously, bent, and picked it up. The metal was ice cold, older than it should have been, its surface worn smooth. He looked back at the locked front door. Maybe this was it. Maybe the house was giving him a way out. He shoved the key into the lock, twisting hard. It resisted, then clicked. Relief surged, but the door didn't open. Instead, every lamp in the room flared to life at once, bathing the space in a pale, sickly glow. And in the reflection of the glass pane, Thomas saw them, rows of faces peering from the windows behind him. Pale, watching, pressed to the glass like children curious at a zoo. He spun around. Nothing. The windows were empty. Thomas staggered back from the door, his pulse hammering in his ears. The windows behind him stood bare, moonlight pooling against the glass. Yet the image still burned in his mind, those pale faces, dozens of them, eyes hollow, lips pressed close as though whispering against the pane. "No," he said aloud, as if speaking it could make it untrue. "I didn't see that. It's fatigue. That's all." But the silence didn't let him have the comfort. It seemed heavier now, vibrating faintly, like the stillness before thunder. He turned the key again, tried to yank the door open. Nothing. The frame shuddered but held tight. His throat went dry. From the corner of his eye, movement brushed past the living room window. Not faces this time, but shadows. Long, elongated shapes drifting slowly across the glass, their forms warped and stretching like figures underwater. He stumbled back toward the center of the room. "What do you want from me?" No answer. The house gave none, only the faint crack of a floorboard above. The sound came not from the hallway he'd explored earlier, but from directly overhead. The bedroom. Thomas clenched the useless flashlight harder. "No. I'm not," he swallowed. His mouth was too dry to finish. The fire pulsed suddenly, its light dimming, then swelling again like a heartbeat. In that rhythmic glow, the quilt on the couch shifted. Slowly, deliberately, as though something beneath it had taken a breath. Thomas's skin prickled. He crept forward, step by careful step, eyes locked on the quilt. The fabric rose again, a faint movement then stilled. "All right," he muttered, though his voice trembled. I'll prove it. It's nothing. Just my head." He reached out and whipped the quilt back. The couch was empty, but the cushions still bore the fresh impression of a body, the dip deep, as though someone had been sitting there only seconds before. And faintly, close enough to feel the breath of it, came a whisper against his ear. "Stay." Thomas spun, swinging the flashlight wildly, its beam cutting shaky paths across the walls. "Who said that?" he shouted, his voice cracking. The house gave no answer. The fire hissed faintly, though it had never made a sound before. Shadows jumped across the walls, elongating unnaturally, as if they bent toward him rather than away from the flames. His heart slammed against his ribs. He backed toward the table, keeping his eyes on the room. "You're not real," he whispered, more to himself than anything else. "I'm tired. I'm seeing things." The glass of water, or what had become of it, still waited on the table. It was no longer red, but murky, like the lake outside. Tiny bubbles rose within, popping soundlessly at the surface. A floorboard creaked above again, sharper this time, followed by another. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Thomas's throat closed. He knew he couldn't ignore it. If someone was up there, if something was up there, He couldn't just wait for it to come down. He forced a shaky breath and steadied himself. "All right," he said aloud, voice wavering. "All right. I'll look. I'll see." The stairs loomed before him, each step coated in shadows that seemed thicker than they had minutes ago. He climbed, one hand clutching the railing, the other gripping the weak flashlight. The beam trembled with his hand, casting restless arcs against the walls. Halfway up, he froze. A low hum drifted down from above. Not a tune exactly, but close, as though someone were trying to remember a lullaby they hadn't sung in years. "Who's there?" His voice broke, fear and anger tangled. The humming stopped. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before him, every door closed now. Even the bedroom that had stood open earlier. His pulse thudded. "No," he whispered. "I left it open." The nearest doorknob twitched. Just a flicker of movement, like a muscle spasm. Then again, sharper, rattling in its socket. And suddenly, every door in the hallway began to rattle at once. The sound was deafening, a chorus of rattling knobs clattering against the silence, each door shuddering violently in its frame. Thomas staggered back, clutching the banister for balance. The flashlight beam skittered wildly, barely holding steady. "Stop it!" he shouted, though the command came out more like a plea. The rattling ceased. All at once. The silence rushed back in like a wave, crushing, absolute. Thomas's chest heaved. Sweat stung his eyes, and his hands slipped on the railing. For a long moment, he couldn't move, couldn't think. Then, with a dry creak, one door in the middle of the hall drifted open. Slowly. An inch at a time, until the crack widened enough to show a sliver of blackness within. Thomas licked his lips, throat parched. He lifted the flashlight, forcing the beam into the room beyond. The light struck pale wallpaper, patterned faintly with faded roses. A dresser hunched against the far wall, its mirror cracked down the center. The crack split the reflection like a wound, doubling every shape caught within. Thomas whispered to himself, "Just a room. Just a room." He stepped closer. The air around the doorway was cold, unnaturally so, seeping into his skin like icy water. He pushed the door wider, the hinges groaning. The bed within was neatly made. Too neatly, every corner sharp, every pillow aligned. The kind of perfection only achieved when no one ever truly slept there. Then he saw it. On the quilt lay a single object. A child's doll, porcelain-faced, its glass eyes wide and glossy. Its tiny mouth curved in a faint smile, painted bright red. The flashlight trembled in his hand. He hated dolls, had since childhood. He almost turned and fled. But then the doll's head moved. Just slightly. A tiny tilt, as though acknowledging him. Thomas gasped, stumbling backward. His shoulders struck the hallway wall with a thud. The doll rolled onto its side, then slid slowly across the quilt, though no hand touched it. And in the silence, the house whispered again, nearer this time, closer to his ear. "Stay." Thomas's breath rasped in and out, shallow and uneven. He wanted to run, down the stairs, through the door, into the forest, but his legs felt anchored, rooted to the hallway floorboards. The doll had stopped moving, lying on its side now, its painted cheek pressed against the quilt as though it were listening to something beneath the bed. The silence thickened. The flashlight in his hand flickered, its beam weak but still trained on that porcelain face. "Not real," he whispered. "You're not real." The doll's glossy eyes caught the light, twin pinpricks of reflected glow that seemed almost alive. Then, without warning, its tiny jaw shifted. The porcelain mouth opened with a faint, brittle crack. A child's voice spilled out. Thin. Hollow. "You came back." Thomas staggered into the doorway, shaking his head violently. "No. I've never been here." The doll's painted lips didn't move again, but the voice lingered in the room like a breath that refused to fade. "You promised." Thomas's heart hammered. "Promised what? I don't know you." The cracked mirror across the room caught his reflection, warped and doubled. In the fractured glass, he looked pale, wide-eyed, trembling. But behind his reflection, in the mirror's broken seam, something else flickered. A shadow, tall and thin, standing just behind his shoulder. He whirled around. Nothing. Only the hallway, empty and still. When he turned back, the bed was bare. The doll was gone. No, he whispered, frantic now, scanning the floor, the corners, beneath the bed frame. Empty. The quilt was smooth again, untouched. A chill crept up his spine. Slowly, unwillingly, he turned his head toward the door he'd left ajar behind him in the hall. The doll now sat in the doorway. Upright. Waiting. Its head tilted slightly, glass eyes fixed on him, lips curved into their painted smile. Thomas stumbled back into the room. The door slammed shut with a thunderous crack, plunging him into darkness as the flashlight finally died. And in that suffocating black, the voice whispered again, closer now, as though pressed right to his ear. Stay. The darkness was complete. Not the kind you got when the lights went out in a city, where some faint glow lingered on the horizon. This was absolute. A black that pressed in on Thomas from every side, thick and suffocating. He fumbled with the flashlight, shaking it, slapping the casing with desperate hands. Nothing. The batteries were dead, drained as though the house had sucked the last spark from them. His chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. He forced himself to move, one hand sliding across the wallpapered wall, searching for the doorframe. His fingers brushed cool wood. He grabbed the knob and twisted hard. It didn't budge. Thomas yanked, shoved his shoulder against the door. Still nothing. The knob turned freely, uselessly, as though the latch no longer existed. The house had sealed him in. Let me out! His voice cracked, ragged. Do you hear me? Let me out! The silence answered first. Then, faintly, from the floor came the scratch of something small moving across the boards. Thomas froze. The sound drew closer, dragging, scraping. His mind went instantly to the doll. No, he whispered, backing toward the bed. No, no, no! The scratching stopped. A pause that stretched long enough to make his skin crawl. Then the mattress dipped. The weight was subtle at first, the faintest impression against the quilt. But slowly, steadily, the fabric sagged deeper, as though something invisible had climbed onto the bed beside him. Thomas backed against the headboard, fists clenched tight, eyes wide though the dark swallowed everything. Get off, he begged. Please, get off. The dip grew heavier. Closer. Until he felt the quilt tug, the fabric sliding against his leg as though something had crawled toward him. Then, a cold hand brushed his ankle. Thomas screamed, kicking wildly. The mattress shifted, but the weight didn't lift. Another hand joined the first, seizing his calf with a grip like ice, tightening slowly. And in the dark, the whisper came again, but now from the bed itself, soft and tender, like a lullaby. Stay with us. Thomas thrashed, his heels striking against the quilt, but the hands didn't release. They tightened, icy fingers digging through the fabric into his skin. The cold radiated up his leg, numbing, spreading like frostbite. Let me go! He shouted, jerking, pulling, but the grip was inhumanly strong. The mattress groaned beneath the invisible weight as though more than one figure was climbing closer. The air thickened, heavy with a scent like damp earth and stagnant water, the smell of things that should have stayed buried. Thomas twisted, reaching for the nightstand. His hand struck the oil lamp, knocking it over. Glass shattered. The smell of kerosene filled the air, sharp and nauseating, though no flame followed. The house wouldn't allow fire, not here. Something leaned close to his face. He couldn't see it, but he felt it, the pressure in the air, the prickle along his skin, the unmistakable warmth of breath against his cheek. Please, he whispered, voice breaking. Please, I don't belong here. A chorus answered this time, not one whisper but many, layering over each other in a low, hollow chant. You do, you do, you do! Thomas's heart pounded so violently it hurt. He kicked again, pulling with every ounce of strength he had. The grip loosened just enough for him to wrench his leg free. He tumbled off the side of the bed, landing hard on the floor. The boards were freezing, as though the lake itself seeped through them. He crawled toward the door, clawing at the knob again, slamming his shoulder into the frame. Still sealed. Behind him, the bed groaned again, the quilt rising and falling as if unseen bodies shifted beneath it. Then, from the darkness, the doll's voice piped up once more, clearer, closer, right by his ear though nothing was there. "You promised you would stay." Thomas's breath caught. Tears burned his eyes. "I never promised you anything." The voice giggled, high, childlike, wrong. "Yes, you did. At the lake." Thomas froze, pressed against the door, his breath shuddering in and out. The doll's voice lingered in the dark, sweet and accusing. "At the lake," it repeated softly, almost sing-song. "You promised us." "I've never been here," Thomas snapped, though his voice broke with desperation. "I've never seen this place before in my life." The silence swallowed his words. Then, slowly, the sound of dripping water filled the room. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop echoing too loud, too close. Thomas lifted his hand from the floor. His palm was wet. He flinched back, raising his hand to the dim light spilling through the cracked mirror. It glistened not with water, but something darker, thicker. The smell hit him, iron, metallic. Blood. "No!" His voice was a whimper. "This isn't real." The chant rose again, dozens of whispers swirling around him, as if the walls themselves breathed the words. "The lake keeps its promises." Thomas clutched his head. "Stop it! I don't know what you're talking about." A groan answered him, long, low, like wood under strain. The mirror on the dresser shuddered. Cracks spread across its surface, webbing outward. His reflection fractured into dozens of jagged pieces, each shard showing him pale, trembling, terrified. But one shard showed something else. Not him. Not the room. The shard showed the lake, black and endless, moonlight rippling across its surface. And in that water, faint but clear, a figure floated. Face down. Arms spread. Hair drifting like weeds. Thomas's stomach turned. He staggered toward the mirror, staring. The figure's body bobbed once, then slowly rolled over. The face revealed was his own. He staggered back, heart thundering. "No. No, that's not me. That's not me!" The doll's voice sang out, clearer now, almost gleeful. "You drowned here, Thomas. You belong here. You promised." The floor beneath him groaned. A cold wetness seeped between the boards, soaking through his shoes. The lake was rising inside the house. The wetness spread quickly across the floorboards, pooling in the seams, swelling dark as ink. Thomas scrambled onto the bed, the only high ground in the room, though it still bore the invisible weight of whatever had pressed there moments before. The water lapped at the legs of the frame, seeping upward with unnatural speed. It wasn't clear, like lake water should have been. It was black, opaque, swallowing even the pale glow from the cracked mirror. "This isn't happening," he whispered, clutching his knees to his chest. "It can't be happening." The doll's voice floated up from the floor, muffled now, as if submerged beneath the rising flood. "You'll sink again. You'll join us." "I never drown!" Thomas shouted. His throat felt raw, his voice echoing back to him wrong, as though the house were repeating his words in mockery. The water climbed higher. Already it reached the quilt, soaking in, creeping toward him. Cold mist rose with it, curling around his arms and throat like smoke. The mirror across the room trembled violently, cracks widening until the glass exploded outward. Shards scattered across the dresser, but the reflection remained, an unbroken window into hollow lake. The water on the other side rippled with movement. Faces pressed against the surface. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Their features distorted by the shifting current, eyes wide, mouths opening and closing as though trying to breathe. Some were children, some old, some ageless and smooth. Thomas's stomach lurched. He couldn't look away. One of the faces pulled forward, clearer than the rest, and it was his own again, eyes lifeless, lips purple, hair drifting like pondweed. "No," he whispered, clutching the headboard with white-knuckled fists. "That's not me! That's not me!" The bed jolted beneath him, a violent lurch that nearly threw him into the water. Something was underneath, lifting the frame as though the house itself meant to capsize him. And from all around, layered whispers rose in unison, not pleading this time but commanding. "Stay, stay, stay." The bed heaved again, jerking beneath Thomas as though unseen arms lifted from below. He clung to the headboard, breath tearing from his lungs in ragged gasps. The water surged higher, soaking through the quilt. It spread cold and clammy against his jeans, creeping upward like a living thing. Each drop that touched him numbed his skin, as though leaching the heat from his body. "No, no, no!" He scrambled upward, knees slipping on the slick fabric, trying to press himself against the wall above the headboard. The mirror across the room boiled with movement. The faces beneath the surface slammed against the glass as though begging to be let through. Their mouths gaped, their hands slapped, their eyes rolled back white. The sound should have been deafening, but it wasn't. It was muted, muffled, like he was already under the water with them. The doll's voice rang out again, sing-song, childlike. "Don't fight. It's easier if you sink." "Shut up!" Thomas roared, more in terror than defiance. His voice cracked, swallowed instantly by the oppressive silence. The water reached his waist, and with it came something else, movement. Fingers brushing his legs, cold and soft, like weeds in the current. Except weeds didn't grip. Hands seized his calves, yanking downward. He kicked, thrashing, slamming his heel against invisible wrists. The water surged with each struggle, climbing higher, slopping against the walls. "Let me go!" More whispers, layered, droning. "You promised, the lake keeps its dead, the house remembers." The mirror's surface cracked again, not like glass but like ice breaking. A fissure spread from top to bottom, and water gushed through, spilling into the room in a violent rush. The bed tilted, mattress sliding beneath him. Thomas clung desperately to the headboard, but the cold, black water swallowed his chest, his throat. And then it pulled him under. The world went dark, soundless, endless. And in that black water countless pale arms reached out to embrace him. And in the center of the flooded chamber, floating silently, was the bed. The quilt spread out like a raft. Upon it sat the doll. Upright. Waiting. Its glass eyes gleamed in the glow, unblinking. "You came back," it said softly, water lapping against its porcelain body. The plunge stole Thomas's breath. The cold was unbearable, stabbing into his chest, locking his lungs. He flailed in the black water, arms thrashing, but every direction felt the same, up, down, sideways, all swallowed in endless dark. His eyes strained against the murk. Slowly, faint shapes emerged. Faces. Dozens of them, floating around him in the gloom. Their skin pale, their hair drifting like weeds, mouths hanging slack. Some stared blankly, eyes wide and white, others closed as if in sleep. He tried to scream, but the water rushed into his mouth. Panic jolted through him as he choked, fought, clawed for air. But the faces pressed closer, encircling him, their movements strangely graceful, as though the current itself guided them. Hands reached for him. Not hostile at first, gentle, almost tender. Fingers brushing his arms, his shoulders, his hair. Like mourners greeting someone they had long expected. "No!" The word tore uselessly from his throat, bubbles bursting upward, vanishing into nothing. One of the faces drifted closer. A woman. Her features were familiar in a way that chilled him deeper than the cold water. He couldn't place her, yet her eyes, blank and soft, seemed to know him. Her lips parted, and though no sound should have reached him, her whisper was clear. "You promised us. Thomas!" He kicked violently, tearing free of the ring of bodies. His chest screamed for air. He clawed upward, or what he thought was up, desperate for light, for air, for anything but the suffocating dark. Then light. A pale glow above. He surged toward it, arms burning, lungs collapsing. He broke the surface. But not into air. The glow was not the moon. It was a ceiling. Wooden beams stretched above him. He was still inside the house. The room was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of black water stretching to every wall. Thomas clung to the waterlogged headboard, gasping, coughing up mouthfuls of black water that tasted like rust and rot. His limbs trembled, weak from the cold. The bed drifted a few feet away, steady and impossibly dry despite the flood around it. The quilt was untouched, crisp as though it had never been submerged. And the doll sat perfectly centered, its small porcelain hands resting on its lap, its painted smile bright beneath the glow that came from nowhere. "Stay," it whispered again, its voice carrying over the water though no ripple moved the surface. Thomas's stomach lurched. "What do you want from me?" he rasped. His throat burned, every word scraping raw. The doll tilted its head, a stiff, unnatural movement, like the jerk of a marionette string. "You already know. You promised." "I didn't." His voice cracked with panic. "I never promised you anything. I don't even know you." The doll leaned forward just slightly, though its body never left the quilt. "You promised at the lake. All who come here promise." Thomas shook his head violently, flinging droplets from his hair. "I've never been here before tonight." But even as he said it, something twisted in his chest. A memory, or the ghost of one, stirred at the edge of his thoughts. The lake at night, moonlight rippling across still water, a voice drifting just out of reach. He tried to shove it down, but the harder he resisted, the stronger the pull became. "You drowned here," the doll said softly, almost soothing. "And you came back. They all do." The faces rose again around him, half submerged, watching with wide, silent eyes. Their mouths opened in unison, and bubbles streamed upward, filling the water with soundless pleas. Thomas paddled backward, trying to put distance between himself and the floating bed. His legs brushed against something solid beneath the surface. Not the floor, something softer. Something that shifted. He recoiled, heart hammering. Arms. Dozens of them. Pale, waterlogged, reaching up like roots from the dark below. And then the doll's voice grew sharper, losing its childish sweetness, cutting into him like glass. "Stay with us, Thomas." The hands beneath the surface grabbed his legs. The hands closed around his ankles, cold and relentless. Thomas thrashed, slapping at the water, kicking with wild, panicked strength. But the grip only tightened, dozens of fingers winding around his legs like vines. "No! Let go of me!" His scream cracked, swallowed instantly by the vast room. The floating bed remained steady, untouched by the chaos. The doll didn't move, didn't flinch, it only watched, its porcelain head tilted slightly to one side. Its smile seemed wider now, though the pain had not changed. The faces in the water surged closer, circling him. Their eyes gleamed in the pale light, wide and unblinking. Some of them mouthed words, silent, desperate prayers. Others only stared, their expressions blank, resigned. The water churned as the hands yanked harder, dragging Thomas downward. His arms flailed, splashing, slapping the black surface. His chest burned with fear, every nerve screaming. "No! I'm not yours! I'm not!" The water closed over his head. Darkness. Pressure. Silence. His body twisted as the hands pulled him deeper. The faces blurred past, streaks of pale flesh vanishing into the black. The cold bit into him so fiercely he thought his bones might crack. And then light. A faint glow shimmered below, rippling as though from lanterns far beneath the surface. The hands dragged him toward it. He fought, clawed at the invisible arms, but they were countless, impossible to break free from. Shapes took form in the glow. Structures. Walls. Roofs. An entire village resting on the lakebed, houses leaning at impossible angles, their windows dark and hollow. It stretched out as far as he could see, a drowned settlement preserved in silence. The glow came from within the houses. Each window flickered with pale light, like lanterns burning behind the glass. Thomas's lungs screamed, but all briefly cut through his terror. A whole world beneath the water. The voices came again, hundreds this time, seeping from the drowned village. "Stay with us, the lake keeps its dead." The hands pulled him toward the largest structure, a church with its steeple cracked and bent. Its doors gaped wide, swallowing the glow. And inside, something moved. The doors of the church yawned wide, their wood blackened and swollen with centuries of water. As Thomas was dragged through, the heavy beams creaked as if still alive, moaning in protest. Inside, the glow was brighter, but it wasn't from lanterns. Dozens, no, hundreds, of pale figures filled the pews, seated in rigid rows. Their heads lolled, their hair floated in the dark current, but their eyes were open, all of them, staring straight ahead. The pressure of their gaze struck Thomas harder than the hands on his legs. He kicked violently, twisting, but the grip didn't falter. The figures watched him as though they'd been waiting for this moment. He was pulled to the center aisle, dragged slowly past their lifeless congregation. The faces blurred together, children, the elderly, young men and women. Families. Generations. All locked in eternal vigil. "No!" His scream bubbled, rising in a stream of silver air. His chest burned, his vision swimming. "Let me go!" But the whisper rose again, surrounding him, a choir of voices vibrating through the flooded chapel. "You promised, you drowned, you belong." At the altar, the glow pulsed brighter. The hands hauled him forward until he floated before it. There, resting on the water-worn stone, was an object. A book. Its pages rippled though the water didn't stir them. Its cover was bloated, leather-splitting, but the words etched into it glowed faintly. He couldn't read them, his eyes blurred, but he felt them. Heavy. Final. The doll's voice rang clear now, echoing off the church walls. "Sign it." Thomas shook his head violently. "No!" The book drifted open. Words burned across the page in a language he couldn't comprehend, but one line stood out, etched sharp and clear, written in English. "I will stay." The water pressed tighter around him, demanding, suffocating. The pale congregation leaned forward in their pews as though expectant. "Sign it," the doll whispered again. "Or drown again. Forever." The hands tightened, dragging him closer to the glowing book. Thomas's lungs burned, each second underwater, a knife in his chest. His body screamed for air, but the hands refused to let him rise. They dragged him forward until the book loomed inches from his face, its glow searing through the black water. "I won't!" he cried, though the words tore from his throat as bubbles. The page rippled. Letters shifted like insects crawling, rearranging themselves until the single clear line grew larger, bolder, as if shouting at him. "I will stay." The pale congregation leaned closer, their eyes wide, mouths twitching into faint smiles. From their throats came a low hum, vibrating through the water, filling the drowned church with pressure. Thomas thrashed. His fist slammed against the book, but instead of scattering, it pulsed with light. A shockwave ran through him, numbing his limbs, forcing his hands open. A quill appeared. It was long and thin, pale as bone, its nib sharp and gleaming. It drifted down into his hand as though the water itself placed it there. "No!" His body shook with terror. "I'm not signing anything!" The doll's voice carried closer now, though he didn't see it. "You already did. Long ago. This is only the memory. I never." His protest cut short as the hands forced his arm down. The quill hovered over the page, trembling, its tip grazing the glowing words. The congregation's hum grew louder, an ocean of voices swelling with one refrain. "Stay, stay, stay!" Thomas screamed against the pressure. In one desperate surge, he jerked his body back, wrenching against the countless grips. Pain lanced through his chest as he tore free for half a heartbeat, enough to send the quill spinning from his hand. It drifted upward, pale against the black, vanishing into the gloom. The voices broke into shrieks, sharp and furious. The congregation thrashed in their pews, their arms flailing, their eyes blazing with sudden rage. The book snapped shut. The glow extinguished. And then the hands yanked him down, hard, dragging him away from the altar into the deeper dark below the church floor. The hands dragged Thomas through the cracked floor of the church as though the rotted wood wasn't there at all. He plunged into darkness so complete it swallowed the last flickers of glow behind him. He kicked and clawed, but the arms were endless, wrapping tighter around him, pulling him downward. His lungs screamed for air. His chest ached with an agony so sharp he thought his ribs might splinter. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Not the sharp sting of icy water, but a deeper cold that sank into his bones, numbing thought, freezing panic. His movements slowed, his limbs heavy as lead. Then light. Not warm, not golden, but a pale shimmer, faint and sickly, leaking up from the abyss below. Shapes emerged. Massive stone slabs, toppled and broken, scattered across the lakebed. An ancient foundation, older than the drowned village above. Strange carvings lined the surfaces, etched in symbols that pulsed faintly with light. Spirals. Eyes. Open mouths. The hands dragged him toward a pit in the center of the ruins. A perfect circle cut into the stone, blacker than the water around it. From its depths, the pale light pulsed like a heartbeat. Thomas shook his head, bubbles escaping in frantic bursts. No, no, I'm not going down there! The water carried no sound, but the voices still reached him. Not whispers now, but a deep chorus, resonant and commanding, rising from the pit itself. The lake keeps its dead, the house keeps its promise. The pit widened as they neared, or perhaps it only seemed to as its darkness consumed his sight. The hands released him at the edge, and for a heartbeat he floated free, weightless. Then something stirred within the pit. A shadow. Immense. For a moment it looked like water itself shifting, folding, coalescing into a shape that dwarfed him. Eyes opened in the dark, too many eyes, glowing faintly, each one fixed on him. Thomas's scream never left his throat. The shadow rose higher, its form breaking the surface of the pit, a body vast and shapeless, arms stretching out like currents themselves. And as it reached for him, the doll's voice whispered once more, soft and near, though the doll was nowhere in sight. You can't leave, Thomas. You already belong to us. The water trembled as the shape emerged, vast and formless, like a shadow given flesh. The pale light from the carved stones flickered across its surface, revealing fragments of features that never stayed the same. A mouth, wide and lipless. Then an eye, then many eyes, then none at all. Thomas kicked backward, but the water itself seemed to pull him closer, a current wrapping around him with invisible force. No, no, please! His lungs burned. He could hold on no longer. He sucked in, instinct taking over, and black water rushed into his chest. Fire seared through him, choking, suffocating. Yet he did not die. The water filled him, but instead of ending him, it thickened inside his lungs, cold and heavy. His body convulsed, but breath still came, wrong, wet, but real. The voices from the pit vibrated through his skull, deeper than hearing, ancient and endless. You are part of us now. The creature extended an arm, if it could be called that. A tendril of black water, shot through with faint pale light, curling like smoke. It brushed Thomas's cheek. The contact was freezing and searing at once, a contradiction that sent shockwaves through his body. Images slammed into his mind. Memories that weren't his. A man in 1842, sinking into the lake, eyes wide as hands pulled him down. A woman in 1917, screaming as her carriage plunged from a collapsing bridge. Children in the 1950s, laughing by the water's edge, until one slipped, and the rest followed. All of them swallowed. All of them dragged here. All of them bound to the pit. Thomas clutched his head, sobbing. No! Stop! That's not me! I'm not part of this! The doll's voice threaded through the cacophony, clearer, cutting into him like a knife. You are. You drowned here before. The lake only takes back what is already its own. No! His body shook with denial, but deep inside, beneath the panic, something cracked. A memory stirred, moonlight on the water, a splash, a choking silence. For an instant, he wasn't sure if he dreamed his life beyond the lake at all. The shadow's tendrils coiled around him, tightening like chains. "Stay!" the voices roared together. "You will stay!" The tendrils coiled tighter, binding Thomas's chest, arms, legs, until he could barely move. The cold seeped into his marrow, into his thoughts, dulling the edges of panic, whispering surrender. "Stay!" the voices urged. "You are already ours!" Thomas thrashed weakly, his muscles screaming. Each movement was like fighting the weight of the entire lake pressing down at once. His lungs filled and emptied with the black water, but no relief came, only the suffocating reminder that he no longer breathed as he should. "No!" he snarled, forcing the sound through clenched teeth. "I won't stay!" The creature's many eyes flickered open again, their glow stabbing into his mind. Images surged through him, snippets of lives lost to Hollow Lake, their last moments etched into the water. Every death a chain, every promise fulfilled. The doll's voice sang through it all, childlike and cruel. "You can't fight forever. You always come back." Thomas clenched his jaw. Rage bubbled up through the fear, hot and wild. "Then I'll break it. Do you hear me? I'll break your curse." The shadow froze for the briefest moment, as though startled. The tendrils loosened, just slightly, enough for him to twist against their grip. He tore an arm free. The motion was agony, like ripping through glass, but he managed it. His hand shot to the belt at his waist, fumbling until his fingers closed around a shape, his car keys still in his pocket from before the road had ended. The keys glinted faintly, impossibly bright against the black water, a spark of the world outside this nightmare. Thomas seized them like a weapon. With a desperate cry, he plunged the jagged metal into the tendril binding his chest. The lake itself screamed. A sound not heard but felt, vibrating through every bone in his body. The shadow convulsed, its form breaking into ripples, its eyes flickering out like dying stars. The tendrils recoiled, thrashing violently. The grip on his leg snapped. The water churned with fury, dragging currents slamming him side to side, trying to pull him back down. But for the first time since entering Hollow Lake, Thomas felt the pull weaken. A path upward shimmered above him, faint, distant light filtering through. He kicked, clawed, forcing himself toward it. His chest burned with unnatural breath, his limbs quaked with exhaustion, but he rose. The pit below boiled with rage, the voices shrieking in a cacophony. "You can never leave! You promised! You are ours!" And still Thomas climbed, dragging himself upward through the endless black. Thomas's arms burned as he clawed upward, every muscle screaming. The pale light above widened, brighter with each desperate kick. The voices below shrieked in fury, but their grip had loosened. The shadow thrashed in the pit, its massive form shattering into waves that slammed against him, trying to drag him back. "Not this time," he gasped, though the water filled his mouth, his lungs. The words felt more like thoughts than sound. The light grew until it blinded him. With one last surge, he broke through the surface. He expected night air, the chill of the forest, stars overhead. Instead, he surfaced into a room. The water was gone in an instant, spilling away as though it had never existed. Thomas collapsed to the floorboards of the house, coughing violently, his body heaving. His lungs sucked in air that burned but felt real. His soaked clothes clung to him, dripping puddles around his knees. The room was dry. The fire burned in the hearth again, its flames tall and golden. The couch sat in its place, the quilt folded neatly once more. The glass of water on the table gleamed clear as crystal. It was as though nothing had happened. Thomas staggered to his feet, every nerve raw with disbelief. "No," he whispered. "No, I was there. I saw it. I felt." The stairs creaked. He froze. Slowly, his eyes lifted. On the landing above stood the doll. Upright, taller now, its porcelain limbs elongated, its body stretched into the height of a child. Its glass eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. "You came back," it said, voice soft but resonant, no longer contained by the fragile body. "They always do." Thomas backed toward the door. His hand seized the knob. To his shock, it turned freely this time. He yanked. and the door swung wide, spilling moonlight into the room. The forest waited outside. The lake shimmered beyond the trees, still and black, a perfect mirror. Freedom. Thomas staggered across the threshold, gulping the night air. He turned, ready to run into the woods. But the house no longer stood behind him. The doorway opened only to the lake. He was standing at its edge, moonlight rippling across the water. And in the reflection, where his face should have been, the doll stared back. Thomas stumbled backward from the water's edge, heart hammering. The lake mirrored him perfectly, his hunched shoulders, his trembling arms. But the face that stared back wasn't his. Porcelain skin, painted lips, glass eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "No," his voice cracked. "That's not me. That's not me." The reflection tilted its head, a stiff, jerking motion. Its lips moved, though no ripple disturbed the water. "You promised." Thomas whirled, scanning the tree-line. The woods were silent, suffocating. No crickets, no owls, no wind through the leaves. Just the lake, waiting. Watching. "I never promised anything!" His shout echoed strangely, bouncing back from the trees as though the forest itself mocked him. The reflection smiled wider, its glassy eyes brightening until they glowed like lanterns beneath the surface. Behind it, shapes rose in the black water, faces, pale and silent, bobbing just beneath the mirror-still surface. Thomas staggered farther back. His heel caught on something solid. He looked down. The quilt, spread neatly on the ground behind him, dry, waiting. And upon it the doll sat, upright, hands folded in its lap. Thomas lurched away, nearly tripping. His breath tore in ragged gasps. "Leave me alone!" The doll blinked. For the first time, its glass eyes closed, then opened again. A crack spread down one porcelain cheek with the sound of splintering ice. "Run if you like," it said, its voice carrying far too clearly in the dead air. "The woods will bring you back. The lake will bring you back. The house will always be here." Thomas turned and bolted into the trees, branches whipping his face, roots clawing at his boots. He ran until his lungs seared, until his vision blurred with exhaustion. When he finally stumbled into a clearing, chest heaving, he looked up. And the house stood before him, leaning, waiting. Its windows glowed with warm light. The front door creaked open. Thomas stood at the edge of the clearing, chest heaving, sweat dripping into his eyes. His mind screamed at him to run farther, to never look back. But his body knew better. He had run miles, or what felt like it, and still, the house waited, glowing softly against the dark. The door hung open, just as before. A voice rose from within, low, coaxing, almost kind. "Come inside, Thomas. You're tired. You need rest." He shook his head violently, clutching his temples. "No. I won't. I won't go back in." The forest shifted behind him. Branches creaked, leaves rustled, though there was no wind. The trees leaned closer, hemming him in, their dark shapes pressing against one another until the path he'd taken was swallowed whole. The only way left was forward. Thomas swore under his breath, then stepped onto the porch. The floorboards groaned like a sigh of satisfaction. Inside, the air was warm again, almost suffocating. But something was different this time. The living room no longer bore the rustic comfort of an old cabin. The couch was gone. The fire replaced by a small television flickering static. And on the walls, photographs. Thomas's heart lurched. They were his photographs. Childhood birthdays, family vacations, his first car, the college dorm he'd barely survived. Every wall was covered, hundreds of moments he thought belonged only to him. He staggered forward, staring in disbelief. How do you have these?" A voice answered from deeper in the house. Not the doll's this time. No, this voice was his own. "You left them here, Thomas. You always do." Thomas spun. At the foot of the stairs stood a man. His build, his stance. It was like looking into a warped mirror. The same hair, though damp and stringy. The same face, though pale and hollow-eyed. The double smiled weakly, as if exhausted. "You keep coming back," it said. "And every time, you leave more of yourself behind." Thomas's knees nearly buckled. "You're not me." The figure tilted its head, the same stiff motion the doll had used. "I was you. Before I signed." Thomas's breath rasped in and out, each inhale burning his throat. He pressed his back against the wall, eyes locked on the figure at the foot of the stairs. It was him. Not just in appearance, but in the way it moved, the way it tilted its head. Even the small nervous twitch of his left hand, something he thought no one else would ever notice, was there. "You're not real," Thomas whispered. The double smiled, lips pale and cracked. "Neither are you." The words hit him harder than a blow. His chest tightened, breath coming faster. "I'm real. I'm alive. I drove here. My car." The double stepped closer, bare feet whispering across the floorboards. "Your car broke down. Your phone was dead. Your body was tired. And still you walked here. Why do you think you knew the path?" "I didn't know it." Thomas spat, though doubt tangled in his voice. "You always know it." The figure's voice dropped lower, calm and even. "You promised. The first time you drowned, you signed. And every time you try to leave, the lake calls you back." Thomas shook his head violently. "No. I never signed anything. I fought it. I fought." The doppelganger raised a trembling hand. Something clutched in its fingers, a quill, pale as bone, gleaming faintly even in the dim light. Thomas's stomach turned. "You threw it away," the double said softly. "But the house keeps it. It always comes back to you. Because you always come back to us." Thomas stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. His pulse thundered. "If you're me, what happens when I don't sign?" The double's hollow eyes met his, and for a moment they looked almost sympathetic. "Almost. You'll drown again. And again. And again. Until you're too tired to fight." The quill lifted, the point gleaming sharp. "The book waits downstairs. It always waits. You can stop running." Thomas's hands curled into fists. His voice trembled, but he forced the words out. "I'll never sign." The double smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Then you'll never wake." The doppelganger stood still, the quill balanced delicately between its pale fingers. The glow from its point reflected in its hollow eyes, two pinpricks of light staring into Thomas like knives. "You'll sign," it said softly. "Even if it takes 100 drownings. 1,000. Thomas forced his voice steady, though his body trembled. "Then drown me again. I'll keep fighting." The figure's face twitched. A crack formed across its cheek, jagged and sudden, like porcelain splitting. It tilted its head, the motion stiffer now, unnatural. "Stubborn," it rasped, its voice distorting. "Always stubborn." The house groaned around them, a deep, resonant sound like timbers under impossible weight. The photographs on the walls shivered, then one by one began to fall, glass frames shattering against the floor. Thomas flinched as shards skittered around his boots. The double stepped closer, dragging the quill along the wall. Where the tip touched, it left a black line that smoked faintly, hissing as though burning into the wood. The smell of scorched earth filled the room. "You think this is the first time you've said no?" the double hissed. "It isn't. You've refused before. You've run before. And always, you come back." Thomas backed toward the door, his hand fumbling for the knob. To his shock, it turned freely again. His heart leapt. He shoved the door open, only to find not the forest, not the lake, but a hallway. The same hallway from upstairs. Closed doors on either side. The faint sound of rattling knobs already beginning. Thomas staggered back. "No. No, I already..." The doppelganger stepped through the doorway after him. The quill glowed brighter now, bleeding light like liquid. "It doesn't matter where you run. It always brings you back to the choice." The rattling grew louder. Every doorknob shaking, every door trembling. A chorus of wood and metal, building like thunder. The double's eyes gleamed. "Open one." See where it takes you. You'll end at the book. Thomas's breath tore raggedly from his chest. His hand hovered over the nearest doorknob, his pulse hammering so hard he thought his ribs would break. From behind the doors came faint whispers. Some pleading, some sobbing, some laughing. Every voice said the same word. Stay. The rattling surrounded Thomas, a storm of clattering knobs and straining hinges. Each door trembled as though something on the other side clawed to be let out. His back pressed to the wall, he shook his head violently. No. I'm not opening any of them. The doppelganger smiled faintly, quill twitching in its hand. You'll have to. The hall doesn't end until you do. Thomas swallowed hard, sweat burning his eyes. The doors stretched endlessly in both directions, more than he remembered from before, each one shaking harder, louder. He took a hesitant step, then another, the boards groaning under his weight. From the nearest door, a voice seeped through, thin, desperate, like someone pressing their lips against the wood. Thomas, please, help me. He froze. His name. His stomach nodded. The voice was female, trembling with tears. He didn't recognize it, but something in it tugged at him. That's not real, he whispered. It's as real as you want it to be, his double said softly, standing a few paces behind. But whichever one you choose, you'll see another piece of yourself. The knob before him rattled more violently, the voice breaking into sobs. Don't leave me here, don't leave me in the dark. Thomas's hand shook as it hovered over the handle. He clenched his jaw, then twisted. The door flew open. Darkness yawned within, thick and absolute. He hesitated on the threshold, then stepped inside. Instantly, the floor vanished. He fell, his scream tearing through the void. Wind rushed past, though there was no ground, no walls, only an endless plunge. Then, with a jarring thud, he landed on something soft. He gasped, blinking in the dim light that flickered around him. He was in a child's bedroom. Small bed with a quilt. Shelves lined with toys. A rocking chair by the window. Everything coated in dust. The sobbing came from the bed. Thomas crept closer. A small figure lay curled beneath the quilt, shaking with quiet cries. Hey, he whispered, voice hoarse. It's all right. I'm here. The crying stopped. Slowly, the figure sat up. It was a child. A boy, no older than 8. Pale, gaunt, with familiar eyes. Thomas's eyes. The boy smiled faintly. You left me here. Thomas staggered back a step, his stomach twisting. The boy's pale face caught the dim light, hollow cheeks and wide, unblinking eyes. But it was the familiarity that broke him, the curve of the jaw, the shape of the brow, the way the left eye squinted slightly more than the right. It was him. No, Thomas whispered. That's not possible. The boy tilted his head, glassy eyes glinting. You left me here. Alone. You promised you wouldn't. Thomas's chest heaved. I never promised you anything. The boy climbed out of the bed, his bare feet making no sound on the dusty floor. You said you'd stay. You said you wouldn't let go. Images flared in Thomas's mind, flashes he didn't want, didn't understand. A younger self playing near water, laughter echoing. A slit, a splash. Cold blackness swallowing him whole. A voice, stay with me, Thomas. Don't let go. He shook his head violently, clutching his temples. No! That's not real! The boy took another step closer. His smile widened, though his eyes remained flat and lifeless. It was real for me. Thomas stumbled back, his heels striking the wall. He was cornered. The boy reached out a small, pale hand. Come back with me. Be what you were meant to be. Thomas's pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, but something deeper, a strange ache in his chest, urged him to reach back. To accept. To stop fighting. No, he rasped, forcing the word through gritted teeth. I'm not staying. The boy's expression darkened. His smile twisted too wide, splitting his face like cracked porcelain. His voice grew deeper, layered, older. You already did. The floor shook violently. The bed toppled, toys scattering across the room. The rocking chair lurched forward, creaking once, twice, before tipping violently on its side. Thomas tried to run, but the walls warped, stretching and closing in. The boy's body elongated, limbs snapping long and crooked, eyes glowing like lanterns. "You left me," the voice boomed, shaking the walls. "And now you'll never leave." The boy lunged. The boy's body stretched unnaturally, arms snapping longer with each step. His fingers curled into claws, porcelain cracks splitting across his pale skin. His mouth yawned wider, splitting too far, rows of tiny, glass-like teeth glinting in the dim light. Thomas stumbled sideways as the creature lunged, slamming into the wall. The plaster cracked around him, dust billowing, his lungs burning as he gasped for breath. "You can't run from yourself," the child's voice thundered, layered and distorted. "You can't run from what you left behind." The creature's clawed hands swept through the air, grazing Thomas's shoulder. Pain tore across him, sharp and searing, though the claws hadn't broken the skin. It felt deeper, like something had raked his very soul. Thomas cried out, clutching the wound. "You're not me!" The child creature's head tilted at a crooked angle, its wide grin frozen in place. "I'm what you drowned. I'm what you left behind in the water." The walls buckled as though the room itself leaned closer, pressing in. The shelves toppled, toys scattering across the warped floor. One landed at Thomas's feet, a toy car, red and chipped with age. He remembered it. He had lost it when he was a boy, the day he fell into the lake. His stomach lurched. The memory was clear now. Falling, choking, water filling his chest. A small voice, his own, pleading to stay above the surface. But no one had saved him. "No," Thomas whispered, shaking his head violently. "I didn't die there. I didn't." The creature rushed him again, claws slashing. He dove aside, rolling across the splintered floor. His hand closed around the toy car, gripping it tight. The boy froze. His glowing eyes flickered. Thomas staggered to his feet, clutching the toy like a talisman. "If you're me," he rasped, "then you remember this. You remember what it meant." The creature shuddered, its body twitching violently. Cracks split wider across its face, porcelain flaking away. Beneath the cracks, water gushed, spilling down its neck, its chest. "You left me," it whispered, voice breaking. "You always leave me." Thomas shook his head, tears stinging his eyes. "I didn't leave. I survived." The creature screamed, a sound so piercing the walls shattered outward into black water. The floor dissolved beneath Thomas's feet, and once again, he fell. Thomas fell through blackness, arms flailing, lungs locked in a scream that never seemed to leave his throat. There was no bottom, no wind, no sound, just the sensation of falling forever. Then, without impact, he landed. His body struck something solid, but no pain followed. The floor beneath him was smooth and cold, like polished stone. He sat up, chest heaving, eyes darting around. The space was vast, a cavern without walls. Shadows stretched infinitely in every direction. Overhead, no ceiling, only a void, faintly glowing with pale light, like moonlight reflected through water. And there, rising from the stone floor, stood rows of chairs. Hundreds. Thousands. Each one filled. Pale figures sat in silence, their faces turned toward him. The drowned congregation. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, unblinking, waiting. Thomas staggered back. "No, no, I got away from you." The silence cracked. A single voice rose from the crowd, soft, feminine, mournful. "You didn't get away, Thomas. You only fell deeper." He spun toward the sound. A figure stepped down from the rows, moving with unnatural grace. She was tall, her hair drifting as though still underwater, her skin pale as moonlight. Her dress clung to her like wet cloth, though no water dripped. "Who are you?" His voice trembled. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "One who signed long before you. One who learned the truth." She extended a hand. The skin was thin, fingers long and delicate. Take it, and the falling ends. Take it, and you'll rest. Thomas shook his head violently, stumbling back. No. I won't sign. I won't stay. The woman's smile faltered. Her head tilted, her eyes glowing brighter. You will. They all do. Behind her, the crowd began to rise from their seats. Every pale figure stood in unison, their movements slow, deliberate. Their whispers spread like a wave. Stay, stay, stay. Thomas's pulse roared in his ears. He turned and ran across the endless floor. But no matter how far he sprinted, the rows of figures stretched on, unending. Their whispers followed, pressing in from every side. Then, ahead of him, a single door appeared. Wooden, plain, with a brass handle. The whispers surged louder. Open it! Open it! Open it! Thomas slowed, chest heaving, sweat mingling with the damp chill clinging to his skin. The door stood solitary in the endless hall of pale figures, its wood smooth, its brass knob gleaming faintly under the cavern's ghostly light. Behind him, the congregation whispered in unison, their voices weaving into a constant drone. Open it! Open it! Open it! He clenched his fists. No. Every door is a trap. Every single one. The whispers shifted, higher now, sharper. Coward! 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 The woman who had spoken before stepped closer, her wet dress trailing along the stone floor without a sound. The door leads where you belong, Thomas. To the truth. Don't you want to know why you always come back? Thomas's breath caught. His mind raced. Why did the path to the lake feel familiar? Why did fragments of drowning claw at his memory like scars? He shook his head. It's just another trick. The woman smiled faintly. All truths feel like tricks before you accept them. The crowd pressed closer, their eyes glowing, their pale arms reaching. Their bodies made no noise, yet the air thickened with their presence, as if their sheer numbers crushed him toward the door. Thomas backed against it, the wood cold against his spine. His hand brushed the knob, and a shock pulsed up his arm. Images flickered across his vision, brief, jagged. Himself as a child. Falling into the lake. Hands dragging him down. A voice whispering stay. Then nothing. The vision faded. He gasped, clutching his head. The knob turned beneath his palm on its own. The door cracked open, a sliver of darkness seeping through. Not the empty void he expected. This dark pulsed, alive, breathing. The whispers hushed, every figure falling silent. The weight of the stillness pressed against his ears. The woman leaned close, her breath cold against his cheek. Open it, Thomas. If you don't, the fall never ends. His hand trembled on the knob. His pulse hammered like a drum. He knew he shouldn't. He knew this was another snare. And yet, his fingers tightened. The door creaked wider. The door groaned as it swung wider, darkness spilling out like smoke. Thomas hesitated on the threshold, heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, the crowd of pale figures stood perfectly still, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The silence was unbearable, thick enough to choke on. He whispered to himself, "It's another trick. Just another trick." But his hand moved anyway. He stepped through. The darkness swallowed him. The door shut soundlessly behind. For a moment, there was nothing, no ground beneath his feet, no air in his lungs, no thought in his mind. Just a void that pressed against his skin like a second body. Then light flickered ahead. He stood in a hallway. Not the endless one of rattling doors. This was smaller, familiar. Too familiar. His stomach dropped. It was his childhood home. The wallpaper, faded and peeling. The crooked family photographs lining the wall. The carpet worn thin where his father used to pace. Every detail perfect. "No," he whispered, backing into the wall. "This isn't real." From the kitchen, the sound of clinking dishes drifted. A voice followed, soft, warm, achingly familiar. "Thomas? Dinner's ready." His chest tightened. The voice was his mother's. He staggered forward, shaking his head. "She's gone. She's been gone for years." The kitchen doorway glowed with warm light. A shadow moved across it, slender, familiar. "Don't keep us waiting," she called. "You know how your father gets." The air thickened, charged with dread. Thomas's legs shook. Every instinct screamed for him to turn, to run, to refuse. But the pull of that voice, so real, so impossibly real, drew him on. He stepped into the kitchen. The table was set. Plates gleamed, steam rising from bowls of food. His mother stood by the stove, her back to him. And at the table sat his father. But his father's eyes were wide and glowing, just like the drowned congregation. Thomas froze in the doorway, his chest tightening as though an invisible hand squeezed his ribs. The kitchen looked just as it had when he was a boy, same chipped linoleum, same yellow curtains at the window, same smell of roast chicken and herbs. But it was wrong. His father sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, his hands folded neatly in front of him. His face was pale, skin sagging, his jaw clenched too tightly. His eyes glowed faintly, twin orbs of dull light. They never blinked. His mother turned slowly from the stove, her smile warm, achingly familiar. But her skin shimmered, as if a thin film of water covered her. Drops slid down her cheeks, dripping into the steaming food. "Sit down, Thomas," she said gently. "You're home." His throat closed. "You're not real." His father's head tilted, bones cracking with emotion. "What does it matter? Real enough to eat with. Real enough to stay with." The cutlery rattled faintly on the plates, though no one touched them. Steam still rose from the dishes, curling into the air like smoke. Thomas shook his head violently. "No. You're gone. Both of you. You died years ago." His mother's smile never faltered. She carried a dish to the table, setting it down in front of him. "Not gone, Thomas. Waiting. Always waiting. The lake keeps everyone it touches." The smell of roasted meat turned rancid, sour, making bile burn in his throat. He glanced down at the dish. Not chicken. Flesh. Pale and bloated, veins still visible. He staggered back, gagging. "No, no, no, no." His father leaned forward, glowing eyes fixed on him. "Sit. Eat. You've starved long enough. Stay at the table. Stay with us." The whispers rose again, seeping through the walls, through the steaming food, through the floor beneath his feet. "Stay, stay, stay." Thomas's fists clenched. His heart thundered. "I won't stay," he roared. The plates shattered. The food writhed, twisting into pale hands that clawed across the table toward him. And his mother's smile split too wide, stretching ear to ear. The hands burst from the plates, pale and dripping, their nails long and jagged. They clawed across the tablecloth, dragging silverware with them, scratching deep gouges into the wood. Steam poured from the dishes as though the food itself was boiling alive. Thomas stumbled backward, slamming against the wall. His breath tore raggedly from his chest. "Stay away from me!" His father's glowing eyes tracked him, unblinking. "You've always been ungrateful. You never finished what we gave you." The hands reached farther, stretching impossibly long, grasping at Thomas's arms, his clothes. Cold fingers brushed his wrist. He ripped free, staggering sideways as the table legs groaned and splintered beneath the weight of writhing flesh. His mother's voice rang through the chaos, sing-song and bright, but layered with something hollow beneath. "Sit, Thomas. Eat, and you'll never be hungry again. Stay, and you'll never be alone." The food shifted. Meat sloughed away, revealing faces beneath, half-formed, drowned and swollen. Their mouths gaped open, gasping for air. Their voices joined the chant, shrill and desperate. "Stay, eat, stay." Thomas grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it into the table. The dishes shattered, black water gushing across the surface, dousing the pale hands. They shrieked, pulling back, curling into themselves before collapsing into stillness. The kitchen lights flickered violently, plunging the room into pulses of dark and dim. In one flash, his parents sat calmly at the table, smiling, waiting. In the next, they were skeletal, their jaws unhinged, glowing eyes boring into him. He clutched the counter for balance, his heart slamming against his ribs. "You're not them. You're not real!" His father rose from the chair, movement stiff, creaking. "We're real enough to keep you." His mother's head twisted, water dripping from her hair. "You promised you wouldn't leave us, Thomas." The walls groaned, the wallpaper bubbling as though water seeped behind it. The windows shattered outward, and beyond it lay not the backyard he remembered, but the lake, black and waiting, its surface rippling as though eager. Thomas's skin crawled. He bolted for the doorway, desperate to escape. But when he looked back once more, the kitchen was empty. No parents. No table. No food. Only the doll, sitting neatly on a chair, its painted smile gleaming in the flickering light. "You'll eat next time," it whispered. Thomas's chest heaved as he staggered back from the chair where the doll sat. Its glassy eyes gleamed faintly, catching the flicker of the failing lights. "I'm not staying," he rasped. "You can't make me." The doll tilted its head. A faint cracking sound ran through its porcelain cheek. "You've said that before." The kitchen groaned. The cabinets buckled inward, their doors warping and sagging. The yellow curtains by the shattered window darkened, shriveling to rags as if rotted by centuries of damp. The floor beneath Thomas's boots bubbled, softening, until each step squelched as though he walked on soaked earth. He gagged at the smell. The warm aroma of roast chicken had soured completely into the stench of decay, mildew, stagnant water, meat left to rot. He stumbled toward the hallway, but the doorway had closed. No trim, no wood, just wallpaper stretching seamlessly over the frame. He slammed his fist into it. Solid. "No, no, no, no!" He clawed at the seam until his fingernails split, blood smearing the faded wallpaper roses. Behind him, a low hum began. The refrigerator shuddered. Its rusted door creaked open on its own. Thomas turned, dread hollowing his stomach. Inside was no food. No shelves. Just darkness. And from that darkness, pale hands reached out, small ones, like children's, dozens of them, clawing and grasping. Their nails scraped the linoleum, dragging themselves forward. "Stay," the doll whispered, still seated at the table. "Feed them. Be fed. The house always hungers." Thomas snatched a knife from the counter, his grip trembling. "Stay away from me!" The children's hands pulled farther out of the refrigerator, arms stretching endlessly, bodies not following. Their fingers clutched at the air, reaching for him. Some seized the counter's edge, pulling themselves closer with wet, sucking sounds. The wallpaper behind him bulged, swollen with trapped water. A pale face pressed outward, distorted beneath the paper, its mouth moving soundlessly. The bulge burst. Black water sprayed into the room, flooding the floor, soaking Thomas's legs in icy cold. The doll's smile never faltered. "The house is filling again. You'll drown soon, Thomas. It's easier if you stop fighting." The water rushed across the kitchen floor, black and cold, swallowing Thomas's boots in seconds. He staggered back, clutching the knife, his chest heaving. The refrigerator door gaped wider, the children's hands spilling out faster, dragging themselves across the linoleum with wet, slapping sounds. "Stay," their voices whispered together, though no mouths moved. "Stay, play, stay." Thomas slashed at the nearest hand. The blade passed through with sickening ease, but instead of blood, black water poured from the wound, splattering the walls. The severed hand dissolved, reforming instantly at the wrist, fingers twitching eagerly. His pulse thundered. He swung again, but it was useless. The more he cut, the more the water spread. The wallpaper bulged farther, faces pressing outward in grotesque rows, mouths wide, eyes bulging, all gasping for breath. The paper split, and black water spewed forth, joining the rising flood. It was at his knees now. Thomas stumbled to the table, planting his hands on its edge. The doll still sat calmly, watching, its porcelain smile unchanging. The cracks on its face spread wider with faint pops, water dripping steadily from within. "Stop!" Thomas shouted, his voice raw, ragged. "I'm not drowning again." The doll tilted its head. You always do. The lights above sputtered violently, then burst. Shards of glass rained down into the water. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the glow of faces beneath the surface, pale and drifting. Their eyes gleamed faintly, watching him from below. The water surged to his chest. Cold fingers brushed his ribs, his stomach, his throat. He slashed wildly with the knife, but the blade met nothing solid. He gasped for air, his breath tearing short. No, not again. The doll's voice echoed, deeper now, layered with countless others. You promised. The flood rose higher. His chin, his mouth, his nose slipped beneath. The last thing Thomas saw before the water covered his eyes was the doll leaning forward, porcelain jaws cracking wider than any human mouth could. Then the lake swallowed him whole. The plunge was merciless. Cold black water closed over Thomas's head, filling his ears, his mouth, his lungs. For a moment, panic blinded him, just thrashing, clawing, desperate bursts of movement in every direction. Then the water stilled, heavy and suffocating. His body hung suspended, drifting like all the others. The glow returned. Pale light shimmered ahead, rippling across countless faces. The congregation surrounded him again, rows of drowned men, women, children. Their eyes glowed faintly, blank yet intent, all fixed on him. Thomas's chest heaved, though no air came. Somehow, impossibly, he was still breathing the water. The thought turned his stomach, but survival overrode disgust. One of the figures floated forward. An old man, his face wrinkled, skin bluish and sagging. His lips moved, though no bubbles escaped. You'll never rise, boy. None of us do. Thomas's hands trembled. No. I'm not one of you. I'm not. The old man reached out, fingers curling around Thomas's wrist. The grip was weak, soft, but the water around it pulled harder, dragging him down. Others joined. Pale hands brushed his arms, his shoulders, his hair. Their touch wasn't violent at first, it was tender, almost welcoming. But the weight of them multiplied, pulling him deeper. You promised. Dozens of voices whispered together. You promised us rest. Thomas jerked free, thrashing wildly. I never promised anything. The congregation's glow flared brighter now, their whispers rising into a chant that reverberated in the water. Signs stay, signs stay. Thomas's pulse roared. He spun, searching, desperate for any escape. And there it was, at the center of the drowned assembly. A lectern of black stone, rising from the depths. Upon it lay the book again, its pages glowing faintly. The quill hovered above, waiting. No! Thomas bellowed, his voice muffled, torn ragged in the water. The congregation leaned forward as one, glowing eyes burning. Their chant shook the water itself. Signs stay, signs stay. The book snapped open. Its pages flipped violently, though there was no current, the words glowing brighter with every turn. And this time, there wasn't just one line etched in English. There were two. I will stay. I will not. The quill floated toward him, its nib gleaming. The quill drifted closer, pale as bone, leaving a faint shimmer in the water as it moved. Thomas backed away, chest heaving though he needed no air. His pulse hammered in his temples. The congregation parted, making a path to the lectern. Their glowing eyes never blinked, never shifted. Every gaze pressed into him, heavy, demanding. The book lay open. The words glowed brighter, burning against the page as though carved in fire. I will stay. I will not. Thomas's hand shook violently. It's a trick, he rasped, bubbles spilling from his lips. Both are traps. The old man floated forward again, his skin hanging in folds, eyes glowing brighter. Choose, boy. One line chains you to us. The other chains you to the fall. Both end here. Thomas's throat closed. His mind raced, desperate. Then why give me a choice? The doll's voice answered from behind him, sharp and sweet. Because you begged for one. Thomas spun. The doll hovered in the water now, taller than before, its limbs stretched long, cracks crawling across its porcelain face. Its glass eyes gleamed like twin lanterns. "You've written both before," it whispered, over and over. "Stay. Not stay. Stay. Not stay. It makes no difference. You always come back to the page." Thomas clutched his head, shaking violently. "No. That's not true. I didn't." The quill pressed into his palm. He tried to throw it away, but his fingers clenched around it against his will. The nib glowed brighter, brighter still. The book pulsed with light. The congregation's chant rose, deafening. "Sign, sign, sign." Thomas staggered forward, fighting every step. His arm lifted on its own, trembling as those strings pulled his muscles. The quill hovered above the glowing page, its tip dripping black ink that spread into the water like smoke. "I won't!" he roared. "I won't stay!" The words echoed in the water, shaking the book. The two lines flickered, blurring, shifting. For an instant he saw something else, faint letters forming between them. A third line. "I will break you!" The congregation shrieked as one, their glow flaring, their bodies convulsing violently. The book's pages shuddered, the water itself trembling as though the lake rejected the words. The quill pressed harder into his hand, forcing him down toward the page. The quill burned in Thomas's grip, its bone shaft searing his palm, but still his hand refused to release it. The congregation's chant swelled, a crashing tide of sound. "Sign, stay, sign, stay." The book's pages rippled as if alive. The glowing lines pulsed with impossible heat. "I will stay. I will not." They flickered, trying to smother the faint third line that hovered weakly between them. "I will break you." Thomas's heart slammed against his ribs. Every instinct screamed that writing those words was worse than either choice, that to defy the house meant drawing its full fury. But something deeper, raw and primal, urged him forward. He forced his arm down, veins straining as if he fought invisible chains. The nib hovered over the page. The doll's voice screeched through the water, high and sharp. "Don't you dare!" The quill touched parchment. Black ink spilled. Not smooth strokes, not careful letters, but jagged scratches torn into the glowing page. His hand spasmed, dragging the words out with desperate force. "I will break you," the lake screamed. The sound tore through his skull, a thousand voices shrieking in agony. The water convulsed, currents thrashing him in every direction. The congregation writhed, their pale bodies twisting, their glowing eyes bursting into streams of white light. The book snapped shut with a thunderous crack. The quill shattered in his hand, fragments slicing his palm. Blood, real blood, spilled into the water, curling upward like smoke. Thomas's body convulsed, agony rippling through him. The shadow from the pit surged upward again, vast and formless, its many eyes flaring wide. Its voice thundered so deeply it rattled his bones. "You defy the lake, you defy the house!" Thomas screamed back, his voice breaking. "I defy you!" The shadow's tendrils lashed out, seizing him, dragging him down. But for the first time, he felt its grip falter. The ink on the book still glowed faintly in the water, jagged words refusing to fade. The congregation dissolved into fragments of light, scattering like sparks into the dark. The lake itself seemed to collapse inward, pulling him with it. He was falling again, this time through water that roared like a storm. The shadow's fury followed, its voice shaking the void. "If you will not stay, then you will be broken instead." The fall was endless, a roaring plunge through black water churned white by the lake's fury. Thomas's limbs flailed helplessly, battered by currents that came from nowhere, slamming him from side to side like a ragdoll. His chest burned, his skull rang, but still the words he had written glowed faintly in his mind. "I will break you." The lake had heard. The house had heard. And now they sought to tear him apart for it. Shapes surged in the water, not the congregation this time but fragments of them, arms without bodies, faces without skulls, eyes floating free. They circled him like predators, their whispers fractured, broken, furious. "Traitor, breaker, destroyer!" One slammed against him, an arm hooking around his throat, dragging him down. Another clutched his wrist, its nails digging deep. Pain flared, sharp and real, warm blood mingling with the cold water. Thomas screamed, thrashing wildly. "I won't belong to you!" The fragments swarmed, wrapping him in a tangle of limbs and hair and teeth. They didn't try to drown him, they wanted to tear him, piece by piece, to scatter him as they had been scattered. Through the chaos, the shadow loomed again. Its form filled the water, its many eyes glowing brighter, mouths yawning wide. It was larger than before, stretching beyond sight, a shape so vast it seemed to be the lake itself. Its voice thundered, shaking the broken fragments around him. "You will not break the house breaks you!" The fragments surged tighter, bones cracking as Thomas's ribs squeezed under their grip. His knife, lost somewhere above. His strength ebbing. Yet deep inside, something flickered. The blood spilling from his palm, the wound where the quill had shattered, glowed faintly in the water. Red, bright, alien to this place of black and pale. The fragments recoiled from it. The shadow's eyes narrowed. Thomas stared at the crimson spiral curling upward. His voice rasped through the water, low but steady. "You want to break me? Then you'll choke on me instead." He pressed his bleeding hand to his chest, clutching the wound, forcing the light to spread. The glow flared brighter, until it split the water like lightning. The fragments shrieked, dissolving into ash. The shadow reared back, roaring so loudly the water itself fractured like glass. And Thomas fell through the cracks. Thomas hit the ground hard. Wood splintered beneath him, sending jolts of pain through his ribs. For a moment, he just lay there, gasping, his body trembling as though every bone had been rattled loose. When he finally pushed himself up, he realized where he was. The house. But it wasn't the warm, waiting cabin he had first entered. It was broken, half drowned. The walls sagged inward, water seeping through the cracks. The fire in the hearth sputtered, coughing black smoke. The photographs on the wall were warped, their frames rotted, the images inside smeared beyond recognition. Every board groaned beneath him as though the place was collapsing under its own weight. Thomas staggered to his feet. His chest still glowed faintly, the light from his wound pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Each pulse seemed to push the shadows back, if only for a moment. "You don't belong here anymore." The voice came from the stairs. Thomas turned sharply, fist clenched, but what stood there wasn't the doll, or the double, or any figure he'd seen before. It was the house itself. The shape at the landing was human in outline, but its body was built from splintered beams and sagging walls. Its arms dripped water, its eyes glowed like burning coals, its jaw stretched wide with the sound of groaning timber. "You dared to defy us," it rumbled, the floor vibrating with each word. "You dared to write against the lake." Thomas's knees nearly buckled, but he steadied himself. His voice shook, but he forced the words out. "You've drowned me 100 times. Maybe 1,000. I'm done being yours." The house creature tilted its head, boards creaking. "You can't escape. You are wood in our frame. You are stone in our foundation. You are promise." Thomas raised his bleeding hand, the faint glow pulsing brighter. "Then I'll tear the whole thing down." The house roared, the sound of every door slamming at once, every window shattering. The floor beneath Thomas split, water surging upward. And in the roaring flood, he swore he heard the doll's voice, faint, almost panicked for the first time. "He's breaking it!" The house lurched forward, its wooden arms stretching toward him. The house creature thundered down the stairs, each step splintering boards, shaking the floor beneath Thomas's boots. Its arms stretched long, jagged beams snapping outward like claws. The walls moaned with its movement, windows shattering in bursts of black water. Thomas stumbled back, every muscle screaming. His hand still burned with the glow of his wound, light pulsing brighter each time his heart slammed against his ribs. "You are part of us," the house roared. "We built you. We drowned you. You will stay." "No!" Thomas shouted, raising his hand high. "I'm not yours anymore!" The light flared. The creature screeched, its wooden body twisting back as though seared by the glow. Shingles clattered from its skull-like head, beams splintered and cracked. But it didn't fall. It only grew angrier. The floor erupted beneath Thomas's feet. Pale arms shot up from the flood, clawing for his legs, grasping, dragging. He kicked wildly, stomping them down, but more rose with every heartbeat. The water gushed higher, surging to his knees, then his waist. The house bellowed. "If you won't stay, then you will be broken!" Thomas's eyes darted to the hearth. The fire sputtered still, flames weak and thin. He felt a thought strike him, wild, desperate. The light in his wound pulsed again, burning hotter. He sprinted toward the hearth, the pale arms ripping at his clothes, his skin. Splinters raked his legs as the house's claws slashed the air behind him. He slammed his glowing hand into the fire. Flames roared upward, bursting out in a wave of light and heat that the lake's water could not smother. The glow of his wound bled into the blaze, twisting it white-hot, blinding. The house shrieked, stumbling back. Its body cracked open, water spilling in torrents from the seams. Windows imploded, doors blew from their hinges. The doll's voice screamed through the chaos, shrill and cracking. "No! You can't unmake us!" Thomas turned, eyes blazing in the firelight. "Watch me!" The flames surged outward in a tidal wave, swallowing the house creature whole. Its wooden frame writhed, collapsing inward. Pale faces screamed from the walls as they burned away, water and fire devouring each other until the roof caved in. The flood surged one last time, pulling Thomas under. But this time, he held on to the fire inside him. When the water spat him out, Thomas hit solid ground. He coughed violently, hacking up black liquid that steamed against the floor. His vision blurred, his lungs seared, but the fire inside him still glowed faintly, pulsing in time with his frantic heartbeat. He pushed himself up, trembling. The house was gone. Or rather, what remained of it was a carcass. Charred beams jutted into the air like broken ribs. The roof had caved inward, nothing but smoking ruin. The hearth was a pile of ash. Windows gaped as empty holes. The silence was unbearable. No whispers. No chanting. No rattling doors. Only the distant sound of water lapping at the shore. Thomas staggered forward, boots crunching on blackened wood. Every step seemed too loud, too final. He braced himself, half expecting the doll to appear, grinning from the rubble. But there was nothing. He stopped at what had once been the front porch. Beyond it, Hollow Lake stretched out, still, dark, endless. The moon hung high, its reflection perfect on the water's surface. His chest tightened. The lake looked peaceful, serene, but he knew what lay beneath. The congregation. The pit. The shadow. They hadn't been destroyed. Not truly. The glow from his wound dimmed, fading with each heartbeat. Panic prickled at the edges of his mind. "No," he whispered, clutching his chest. "Not yet. I'm not done." The silence broke. From the lake's surface, bubbles rose. Dozens, then hundreds. The water rippled, distorting the moon's reflection. A voice drifted across the still night. Not the doll's. Not the house's. His own. "You can burn the house, Thomas. But you can't burn the lake." The reflection in the water shifted. No longer the moon, no longer the forest. It was him, staring back, pale and hollow-eyed, lips curved in a faint smile. "You're still ours," the reflection said softly. "You always were." The surface rippled once more, and a pale hand broke through, reaching toward him. The pale hand reached higher, droplets falling back into the lake with tiny plunks that seemed far too loud in the silence. Its skin was bloated, fingers thin as twigs, nails cracked and blackened. The wrist rose next, then the arm, dripping moonlight and shadow. Thomas staggered back, his boots crunching on ash. "No," he whispered. "Not again. I won't touch you." The reflection on the water smiled wider, though his own lips stayed shut. "You already did. Every time you came back. Every time you drowned. Every time you opened the door." The hand beckoned, curling its fingers. Thomas's pulse thundered in his ears. He turned toward the tree line, ready to bolt. But the woods loomed impossibly still, as though each tree leaned closer, hemming him in. The path was gone. "Run if you want," the reflection murmured. "You'll only circle back. The lake doesn't lose what it owns." Thomas gritted his teeth. Rage sparked in him, hot and wild. "I'm not yours!" The pale hand shot higher, grasping the shore. Water surged up the bank, black waves soaking the earth, rushing toward his boots. Thomas raised his bleeding palm, willing the faint glow to return. For a moment it flickered, weak, trembling. The water hissed at its touch, pulling back an inch. But the glow sputtered. His strength was fading. The reflection's voice darkened, layered now with countless others. "You broke the house. But you can't break the lake." The water surged again, wrapping around his ankles, icy and strong. He fought, pulling back, but the grip tightened. The pale hand lunged higher, reaching for his chest. Thomas's voice cracked, desperate. "If I can't break you, I'll drown you." He threw himself forward into the lake, plunging into the black water. The cold swallowed him whole, but this time, he dove willingly. The plunge was like crashing through ice. The lake clamped around Thomas, crushing, cold, endless. But unlike before, he didn't thrash or claw for the surface. He kicked downward, deeper and deeper, his chest burning, his mind screaming, but his rage carrying him on. Shapes swirled past him in the gloom. Faces. Always faces. Their eyes glowed faintly, their mouths gaped in silent wails. The congregation circled him, drifting like weeds in the current. But they didn't touch him. Not this time. They only watched. The deeper he went, the brighter the glow became. It pulsed from the abyss below, like a beacon, like a heart. His ears roared with the lake's voice, booming, relentless. "You cannot break the water! You are water! You are ours!" Thomas forced himself lower, arms dragging through the heavy black. His wound throbbed, the faint red glow leaking from his palm, cutting through the dark. Each pulse pushed back the shadows, if only for a second. And then he saw it. The pit. It yawned wider than before, a perfect circle in the lake bed, its rim lined with those strange carved stones. The symbols writhed now, glowing, alive. From the pit's depths rose a shape too vast to comprehend, coiling and shifting, its body made of current and shadow. The lake's heart. Its many eyes blinked open in the dark, each one locking on him. Mouths split the water, wide and endless, 100 voices spilling at once. "You are part of us! You always were! You cannot unmake the lake!" Thomas's chest screamed. His lungs burned with the ache of holding in water he could not breathe. His vision swam. He clutched his glowing wound, forcing the light brighter, willing it to flare. The pit trembled. The glow wavered. The congregation drifted closer, surrounding him. Their whispers changed, softer now, almost pleading. "Sign, stay, or break and drown forever." Thomas bared his teeth. His voice was ragged, torn, but it carried through the water, clear enough to echo back. "Then drown with me." He thrust his glowing hand into the pit. The light exploded outward, red mingling with white, tearing through the abyss. The lake screamed. The congregation shrieked. The water itself buckled, shattering around him like glass. And Thomas fell. Not down, not up, just out, as if the lake had spit him free. Thomas hit the ground hard, air tearing back into his lungs in a ragged gasp. He rolled onto his side, coughing violently, spitting water that steamed against the earth. For a moment, he lay still, every muscle trembling, waiting for the cold grip of hands to drag him back down. But nothing touched him. Slowly, he lifted his head. He was lying on dirt. Dry, cracked earth stretched around him in every direction. No water. No forest. No house. The air was heavy, metallic, stinking of rust and ash. Above him, the sky was black. Not night, just void. No stars, no moon, no light except for a faint red glow that pulsed on the horizon. Thomas staggered to his feet, swaying. His clothes clung to him, heavy and dripping, though the ground beneath was bone dry. His wound still glowed faintly, red and raw, pulsing weaker now. "Where?" His voice cracked. "Where am I?" The silence answered first. Then a whisper, not from the air but from the ground beneath his boots. "Outside." Thomas froze. The earth vibrated faintly, humming with voices layered together. "Outside the lake, outside the house, but never outside us." He stumbled back, his boots scuffing dust. "No. I broke you. I." The horizon rippled. Shapes rose from the dirt, pale figures clawing upward, their bodies caked in ash. Not drowned this time, but buried. Their eyes glowed faintly as they dragged themselves free, staggering toward him. The congregation again. But twisted, dry instead of wet. Their whispers scraped like sand against stone. "You can't destroy what holds you, you only move between its rooms." Thomas's chest tightened. His knees nearly buckled. "No. This isn't another room. This is different." A figure stepped forward from the ash crowd. Tall, gaunt, its face cracked like dried clay. Its lips split into a wide smile. "Different?" it rasped. "Every room is the same. Every door opens to us. The lake. The house. The earth. We are everywhere you drown." Thomas's pulse thundered. His glow flickered weaker, weaker still. And the horizon pulsed red again, closer now, brighter. A heartbeat in the void. The glow pulsed again, throbbing across the dead sky like a wound in the dark. Thomas shielded his eyes, though the light was faint, distant. It wasn't bright enough to burn, yet it felt wrong, alive, like something breathing in the distance. The ash figures shuffled toward him, whispering in their dry, broken voices. "Don't follow! Don't see! Don't break again!" Thomas stumbled back, then forced his legs to move. Each step crunched over brittle earth that split beneath his boots. His body ached, but the faint glow from his wound answered the horizon's light, pulsing faster with each step. He knew, somehow, that whatever lay there was meant for him. The congregation lurched closer. Hands reached for his arms, his shoulders, his face. Their touch was no longer cold, but hot, searing, cracking his skin like the ground itself. He swore and tore free, sprinting across the cracked plain. The red glow brightened, swelling larger. The horizon shifted, and he saw it wasn't light at all. It was a door. A massive door, rising from the ground, impossibly tall. Its wood was blackened, its brass handles glowing faintly with the red pulse. Symbols etched into its frame writhed, alive, twitching like veins. Thomas skidded to a stop, chest heaving. The door loomed higher than any wall he had ever seen, stretching into the void. The whispers rose behind him. "Don't open it! Don't look inside! It is not for you!" Thomas turned, sweat stinging his eyes. "Every door you've given me was a trap. Every room, another drowning. What's behind this one?" The tallest of the ash figures stepped forward, its jaw unhinging as dust spilled from its mouth. Its glowing eyes burned brighter. "The core. The heart. The first promise." Thomas's pulse thundered. He faced the towering door again, his hand trembling as he raised it to the brass handle. His wound throbbed violently, red light spilling from his palm onto the symbols carved into the wood. The door shuddered, groaning like a mountain splitting in two. The congregation shrieked in unison, falling to their knees, clawing at the earth as if begging it to close. Thomas swallowed hard, sweat dripping into his eyes. Then he pulled. The door swung open, spilling red light across the dead plain. Red light poured over Thomas as the door groaned wider, searing his vision, burning the ash plain into stark shadow. He raised an arm to shield his eyes, but the glow pressed through his skin, into his bones, vibrating with his pulse. When his vision adjusted, he saw what lay beyond. Not a room. Not water. Not ash. A cavern, vast and endless, its walls slick with black stone that pulsed like flesh. Rivers of red light coursed through cracks in the rock, winding into a massive pool at the cavern's center. The pool glowed as though it were molten, yet the surface moved like liquid, rippling outward with each heartbeat. Above it, suspended in the air by nothing, hung a single book, bigger than any lectern, any altar, any drowned church could have held. its cover stretched wide, its pages fluttering without wind. Each word burned with fire, each line scarred into the parchment like a wound that never healed. And at the base of the cavern, hundreds knelt. Not drowned, not ashen, whole. Men, women, children. All alive, all whispering in unison, their voices a tide of sound that shook the cavern. Promise, promise, promise. Thomas staggered forward, his boots crunching over black stone. His throat tightened. What is this? The answer came not as a whisper, not as the doll, not as the house. It was the cavern itself, groaning with a voice that thundered in his chest. This is where the first one signed. Thomas's breath caught. His mind spun. The first. A page of the book flared, and an image seared across his vision. A figure, centuries ago, kneeling by the lake, their hands trembling as they pressed the bone quill to parchment. Their lips whispering, I will stay. The cavern roared. The lake was born of promise. Each soul that drowns is written here. Each vow binding. Each refusal, punished. You cannot unmake what was made. Thomas's wound burned hotter, spilling red light across the cavern floor. The kneeling figures hissed, writhing, their whispers cracking. He clenched his fist, glaring up at the massive book. Then I'll write something new. The cavern shook, laughter booming like rocks splitting. You cannot! The quill is gone. Thomas raised his bleeding palm, crimson light dripping from his wound. His voice cracked, raw but defiant. Then I'll use this. The congregation shrieked. The book's pages flared open, glowing brighter. And the cavern's voice roared. Then you will end everything. The cavern quaked, red light spilling from every crack in the stone. The massive book above the molten pool snapped open, its pages glowing like firebrands. Words swarmed across the parchment, shifting, crawling, reforming into the same chains he had seen 100 times. I will stay. I will not. Thomas staggered forward, the heat searing his skin, his boots crunching against the trembling stone. His wound throbbed violently, every pulse a stab of pain, but also a spark of power. The red glow bled from his palm, dripping like ink onto the rock. The kneeling congregation writhed. Their whispers grew frantic, splintering into screams. Don't! If you break it, there will be nothing. The cavern's voice bellowed, shaking the walls. Sign, Thomas. Sign and end your torment. Or refuse and drown forever. There is no third path. Thomas lifted his palm, the glow blazing brighter than ever before. His voice cracked, raw with rage and exhaustion, but it carried through the cavern like thunder. There's always a third path. He hurled himself forward, leaping across the molten pool. Heat scorched his skin, his lungs burned, but he slammed his bleeding hand against the open page. The book shrieked. Not paper, not ink. Flesh. The parchment convulsed under his palm, pulsing like a heart. Blood smeared across the glowing words, burning them out, replacing them with jagged scratches. His arm shook violently as his wound carved into the page. Not neat letters, not careful lines, just raw defiance carved in blood. I will end you. The cavern roared. The congregation screamed as one, clutching their faces as their eyes burst with red light. The molten pool exploded upward, rivers of fire and water colliding, ripping the stone apart. The book convulsed, pages tearing free, shattering into shards of light that spiraled upward like dying stars. The cavern's voice bellowed, furious, desperate. You have broken the promise. You have broken the lake. You have broken the house. Thomas screamed back, every fiber of his being pouring into the words. Then let it fall! The walls split. The ground collapsed. The figures were swallowed in fire and ash. The lake's voice shattered into silence. And Thomas was hurled into darkness one last time,